understand that we have a bit of breaking news in the whole Connor Stallions vis-a-vis Michigan Jim Harbaugh situation. Just curious, are we going to find a smoking gun here, Pete? I know we have the Central Michigan sideline photo with a guy who kind of looks like Connor Stallions, if we're being honest. What is the new information that you're hearing? Is the Big Ten going to continue to kind of drag this thing along? I also hear that potentially Jim Harbaugh is signing an extension maybe today, or that's kind of in the process of getting done. So what are you hearing right now, Pete, and what kind of updates do we have in the whole kind of Michigan hullabaloo?
Great question, Pete. I appreciate it. I think we'll go from the micro to the macro, Ty. In the micro,
gobsmack us with some information.
In the micro today, we have a new entry into where in the world is Connor Stallions. Central Michigan University is investigating whether or not Connor Stallions was on their sideline in the coach's box wearing coaching gear for their game against Michigan State, the opening Friday night of the season. There are pictures online. Certainly online sleuths are having a lot of fun with this today. That appears to be Connor Stallions in a stiff brim hat, some sunglasses at night, standing kind of in the back behind the O-line coach, near a strength coach right there. So doesn't take a lot of sleuthing to find out there's a lot of overlay between the Central Michigan staff and the current Michigan staff that Stallions is suspended from. So this is just sort of another bizarre entry and chapter into a wonderful dossier of places and things where Connor Stallions has popped up. It would also speak to some brazenness too, that to go do that and actually like dress up for Halloween as a Central Michigan coach essentially is going to make the 30 for 30 better, as a few folks have pointed out. So Central Michigan became aware of this yesterday. You're only allowed, and I'll go right in the weeds for you here, Pat.
Love it.
You're only allowed 50 coaches under NCAA rules in your box. So there's a white designated coaching box between the 20. So, for example, when you do your show, you have to go like either on one of the sidelines or on the edge, right? You're not allowed within that certain place.
We're not allowed in the box.
Yes. So Stallions' pass, if you call that graphic back up, I'm not sure if one of them is quite zoomed in enough. Yet on one of these, his pass says VB, which is for visitors bench. So he was essentially given like coaching access, which is hard to get. There isn't a lot of it. And that has to be signed off by the coach and the athletic director for whoever is going to do that. So that's essentially your EQ guys, your trainers, obviously your assistant coaches, personnel folks. It's the inner circle of a program, designated for coaching the game. So it will be very interesting to see how Central Michigan ends up playing this and explaining this.
That's him, though, right?
I mean, the fact that they can't tell you it's not him at this point sure looks like him.
Oh,
looks like him.
Shit. That's big news. That is him.
There's a lot of there's a lot of side by side, right? And they've had a day to shake this out, and this isn't like a New York City subway where you're trying to identify strangers here. Like these should be the tightest people within the circle of your program. And they have a game tonight, so it'd be interesting to see on ESPN too, I believe, Pat. Maybe you. Little cross promotion there for you. So it'd be interesting to see if anything does emerge out of their Tuesday Maction game tonight.
Because there's now a contract extension that is being fast passed allegedly for Jim Harbaugh with Michigan, and this is before Michigan knows really what all is about to be found out through this entire investigation, or does Harbaugh know what's coming down the pipe? Like, why is this extension happening so quickly, so publicly, and what does this mean about Harbaugh going forward no matter what the punishment is?
I would say this, Pat. It will be interesting to see. I've seen sort of the smoke about that. And, I was cautioned the other night to not report that the contract offer had been rescinded. It did seem logical that there be a bit of a pause. I will say this. If you go back to last year when he had his flirtation with the Broncos, and then the year before on signing day, he interviewed with the Vikings. There's been some flirtations. There's a new president at Michigan, a gentleman by the name of Santa Ono. And Santa Ono basically took over the contract talks last year in a very public way that you rarely see a president do that. And I think he realizes that Jim Harbaugh is an asset to the University of Michigan in a significant way. Look, Bill Self got a lifetime contract while they were under NCAA investigation from the federal basketball scandal. So if there is a contract given to Jim Harbaugh in the upcoming weeks, to me, it would really be one of the ultimate middle fingers to the enforcement folks in Indianapolis, basically saying what the NCAA says and rules doesn't matter. The University of Michigan is just going to plow on and doesn't really care about your multiple investigations.
That's crazy to think about, honestly, because we have no idea what the punishment's going to be, right? We have no clue. That's not coming until after this season, right?
I mean, the only thing you can ever safely say about NCAA punishment, Pat, is that it will be slow. And it's usually a safe guess to say the NCAA enforcement will be ineffective because they have been for decades. But slow is like 100%. If you could bet on one of our gambling partners about an NCAA investigation going slowly, you would have made a lot of money. You'd have multiple beach houses at this point if you've done that the last 3 decades.
Or lakefront.
All we know is this won't be resolved quickly. The Big Ten does not appear motivated at this juncture to do anything. They have the autonomy, as we reported last week, to do something. They have a new commissioner, Tony Petitti. They seem more apt to let a process play out as opposed to
is that Tony?
As opposed to it was not. They seem more apt to let a process play out as opposed to do anything right now. That would obviously undercut their own, probably best chance to win a national title for the league in quite a long time. We also haven't really heard from Michigan on this yet. So I think before the Big Ten is going to do anything, they would at least have to hear Michigan's side. But they're not investigating it necessarily. And there is a lot of evidence that has clearly emerged, but that wouldn't be considered a fact set in order to make a decision on Michigan in this case.
I wish you would have answered that and said, how's your family? And then we would know it was Petitti. Last question for me before AJ and the boys have some more. So I think, with every day that's passing, we're getting more evidence. And obviously, I think cameras are being involved now. There's surveillance cameras. How much more evidence are you expecting us to be able to see as this season continues? And will the more the evidence kind of builds, will that expedite a process or a decision made by anybody so that we can either put this to bed or let us know what it is throughout this season run, that this Michigan team is very, very, very good?
Yes, I completely agree. There's a lot of people who think Michigan's the best team in the country, and they have a strong argument for it. They've been unbelievable so far this year. I'm really anxious to see them in 2 weeks play at Penn State. So in terms of your expedited question, Pat, the flat answer is no. This will not get expedited. It just won't. There's no mechanism for it. And the baseline fact there is that Michigan, with the NCAA case, will get 90 days to respond. So say that the NCAA had their case done, which they will not have done anytime soon, and it was tomorrow. That would mean it would be like February 1st before Michigan even had to respond to start the whole back and forth of the process. So the NCAA process will not impact this season unless they do something drastically against their own bylaws. That would be shocking to me as someone who's covered way too many of these cases for the last 20 years.
Shout out.
So will there be more evidence? Seemingly, we're probably 10 days since Connor Stallion's name emerged publicly, maybe a little bit longer than that. And boy, has there been a lot of evidence that has seemingly emerged that fit the central allegation that he's the centerpiece of this allegedly illegal signal stealing ring. So I think the next thing evidence-wise, or the next threshold evidence-wise, will be, A, what was Jim Harbaugh's involvement, if there was any involvement? That's obviously going to be a huge talking point, factor, central point of the investigation. And the second one is who funded it. There has not been a ton of clarity yet funding-wise, other than some internet sleuths having some fun with some Venmos. So I think those two factors are going to be central to what the NCAA punishment ends up being, if there is a punishment.
Go ahead, AJ. I'm excited to watch it. Hey, this is a big deal. It's a big deal, Pete. You're doing great on the coverage.
Good job, Pete.
Congrats.
Good job, Pete.
Pulitzer Pete, potentially. Go ahead, AJ.
Pete, do you have any idea how many people the NCAA has talked to already about this and how many they plan on maybe interviewing? Because I would imagine talk to a lot. You could ask many assistants around the country, maybe some former players, former coaches. And do they have to speak to the NCAA? Say they want to talk to some Central Michigan coaches. Can they just say, we're good. We don't want to talk?
So great question, AJ. And I think that the NCAA has gone to Ann Arbor in part because they want to show that this is a priority and this is a big deal. NCAA enforcement has been through a half decade of just perpetual inertia. I won't bore you with the alphabet soup of IARP, but they completely fumbled the federal basketball investigation. And so, there's a sense out of Indianapolis that they don't want enforcement to just be viewed as completely incompetent. So they have been up there. But your question specifically, AJ, is a good one about who have they talked to and do coaches have to talk to them? So say, hypothetically, they're going to want to talk to Jim Harbaugh at some point. They would have to set up an interview with Jim Harbaugh. They'd have to go through his lawyers. They would have to give times and dates. They just can't show up and knock on the door and say, hey, we need to talk to you at 4. So I think the central figures, the high-profile figures, the figures that can afford these fancy, expensive lawyers that are going to come into play in this, they have not yet spoken to them. Now, for your question, like if they wanted to talk to the Central Michigan, random fill-in-the-blank assistant coach, he is compelled because he is under the purview of the NCAA to talk to them. Now, he can lawyer up and do all those types of things, but you are not, but if it was just, if he hired some guy and paid him $50 to, go tape a random Indiana game, that guy would not be compelled because he's not under NCAA purview. So those are, I guess, the lines of delineation there.
Perpetual inertia, honestly, this entire thing.